Yeah, we back. Yeah, we back. Now, let's get into it, man. Today, we're going to be reacting to some statements that were made by the chief of French intelligence, the head of the DGSE, Nicolas Lanier. He is the big boss at the French intelligence services, one of our main adversaries, one of our chief adversaries. He broke his silence. I think he did an interview on French media, speaking on the geopolitical situation on the continent and things like that. So we're going to be reacting to the statements made by the adversary, and also just talking about the ongoing propaganda campaign that I see being launched against General Assimi Goïta 100 miles per hour. You know what I mean? Crazy, right? We see the headlines coming out in the international media. They saying this: France urges their nationals to leave Mali as soon as possible. The group linked to Al-Qaeda on the brink of seizing the Malian capital. The United States warned its citizens in Mali to leave the country immediately. An Al-Qaeda-linked jihadist group, JNIM, is bringing Mali to its knees. Jihadis are encircling the Malian capital as they close in on power. Now, as you can see, the propaganda, going 100 miles per hour. And in fact, I just seen President Assimi Goïta just inaugurate a brand new project, a new hospital, right? But they talking about the capital about to fall, things like that. Just last week, he inaugurated a brand new lithium mine, but they talking about the capital about to fall and things like that. But anyways, before we jump into the interview of the French intelligence director, let's take a look at what they're saying on the French media, right? The sensational, propaganda they're pumping out in the French media. Run the clip. I'll be right back.
On the other hand, the suffocation of Bamako is a reality. We've been expecting it since the departure of Barkhane. We knew it would happen. Well, it's here.
All right, we back now. Obviously, we translated that into English. But anyway, let's take a look at some of the propaganda, by the adversary going around, right? This headline came out the other day. France says that insecurity in Mali shows that its pivot to Russia has failed. Now, also, apparently, there's this new social media account by the French government entitled French Response, the official response account of the Ministry of Europe and the French Foreign Ministry. Wow. Listen, man, we've been beating them down so bad in the arena of propaganda and information. These guys came out and made a response account, right? We gotta respond on social media, man. Anyway, they said this: we have noticed quite a change in Russia's position towards Mali, but it is no surprise. It was clear from the beginning that the Russians would not protect the Malians. Today, reality proves it. Right. So as you can see, the adversary going 100 miles per hour when it comes to their operations of destabilization. Now, let's take a look at some of the reactions on social media. This person said this: it looks like France is running a full-time anti-Mali propaganda with the reports of JNIM terrorists taking the capital. But even JNIM did not make such bold claims. Now, that's a fact. With all these headlines going around, man, they about to take the capital any minute now. The capital about to fall. Just wait any second now. Even JNIM themselves, they never came out and said that we plan to take the capital. They never said that. They never said we plan to take nothing, right? The Western media, the international media just ran with it simultaneously at the same time. JNIM about to take the capital. They about to take the capital. But the terrorists themselves never said that they wanted to take the capital. But anyway, this person said this: I think we are somewhat late to the party. Out of health skepticism that the French government is likely running a coordinated Hasbara campaign against the Malian government. And pretty shamefully, much of the Western press is going along with it. Now, that's a fact. Now, that's a white man, right? Even a white man could see it plain as day that this doesn't seem to be organic, right? When all the international media, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, the BBC, CNN, when they all run the same headline at the same exact time, oh man, the Malian capital about to fall, you know that it's multiple foreign intelligence agencies that ran that story to the international press for a certain reason, for a certain purpose. Now, anyway, this person said, yes, the French response page is run by the French Foreign Ministry. Remember, 2 years ago, President Macron called on all of his ambassadors and told them that they have to be very aggressive and go on the offensive because there is an anti-French sentiment amongst Pan-Africanists. Therefore, they must retaliate. They are the ones spreading all the fake news among Mali and the AES. Now, listen, I don't blame the French for taking the fight to social media because social media has been one of the main battlegrounds, right? And if you remember, a couple weeks back, I did that paper, right? We actually read that paper from the French Economic School of Warfare, where they actually cited Pan-Africanism as one of their main adversaries. And in that paper, it was like over 200 pages. They mentioned the word Pan-Africanist over 250 times, right? So, like I said, man, I don't blame them for, coming back with the counter propaganda, because we've been smashing them when it comes to the propaganda. We've been destroying the French. So, I don't blame them for, coming back and retaliate. But at the same time, we still gonna be firing shots. Anyway, this person said, they haven't been able to hold a single city, and they're at the gates of Bamako. Please. That's what I said, man. Homie probably watched the channel. Anyway, let's get into the French intelligence director, the head of the DGSE, right? And like I said, the DGSE is the French equivalent of the CIA. Now, the previous director of the French DGSE was a gentleman by the name of Bernard Arnault. Unfortunately, Bernard Arnault, I believe he was fired sometime last year because the French government was taking so many losses in Africa that he was fired, because as the head of foreign intelligence, you're supposed to be on the job. You're supposed to know when things like this are about to occur. You're supposed to know when the black man is about to make a move, and you're supposed to preemptively, prevent that from taking place. But when multiple governments fall in succession, of course, you had to get fired. Of course, yes, the black man, the reason why Bernard Arnault, the former director of French intelligence, was fired was because he failed to prevent the black man from taking power. Take a look up on the screen. Bernard Arnault was not technically fired, but he did leave his position as the Director General for External Security, the DGSE, in January 2024, and the setbacks in the Sahel region were widely cited as a key factor contributing to his replacement. The French intelligence services under Bernard Arnault's leadership since 2017 faced significant criticism from the French executive branch for failing to anticipate a series of military coups in Mali, Burkina, and Niger, which resulted in major setbacks for France's influence and military operations in the region. So yes, he had to get fired. Yeah. And then he got replaced by a gentleman by the name of Nicolas Lanier. As you can see, French domestic intelligence chief has been appointed the head of foreign espionage. So he was originally the head of domestic intelligence, and then he was promoted to foreign intelligence, the director of the DGSE, right? So anyways, let's get into this story. The head of the French Directorate General of External Security, the DGSE, Nicolas Lanier, said on Monday, November 10th, today, on the national radio in France, that the jihadists of JNIM affiliated with Al-Qaeda wanted the fall of the military government in Mali. In other words, according to the information of the DGSE, the jihadists want to overthrow the military government in power since the coups of 2020 and 2021 that propelled Colonel Assimi Goïta to the head of Mali. Now, time out. Isn't it just so ironic that both the terrorists and the French government both have a similar objective, which is the fall of Assimi Goïta's government? Isn't that so ironic? Anyway, let's continue. Nicolas Lanier, the head of the French intelligence services, indicated in an interview that the intelligence available to the DGSE shows that JNIM is not capable or willing to control the country, and it is also aware of its limitations. Now, I'm going to jump into the clip. Of course, I'm going to translate it to English. Run the clip. I'll be right back.
The map of global jihadism, there is a place flashing right now. It's Mali, it's West Africa, the GNIM, which is the Al-Qaeda group in the Sahel. Stop me if I'm wrong, the GNIM, it's encircling right now the Malian capital, Bamako. The French are being asked to return. Is it a situation out of control?
First, Africa today, when we look at it, and particularly the Sahel, but we focus on the Sahel because that's where we have our interests, including historical ones. But we focus on the Sahel because that's where we have our interests, including historical ones. That's where we have our interests, including historical ones. That's where we have our interests, including historical ones. Since the departure of French troops, starting in the year 2020, no one is pleased about it. No one is pleased about it. This intention of the JNIM to encircle Bamako with a political objective of bringing down Bamako.
All right, to December, to be specific, the possibility that Mali becomes a state partly controlled by terrorists, as was the case in 2013, with this risk that had led François Hollande at the time to intervene.
The information we have shows that the JNIM is not necessarily capable or willing, this organization, to control the country, to control Mali, aware also of its limitations. However, everything suggests that the JNIM wants the fall of the junta and desires the establishment of a power that is indeed favorable to the installation of a caliphate over all or part of Malian territory,
which could also extend beyond the borders of Mali.
Obviously, what we see today is a form of permissiveness in the movements between Burkinabe.
All right, we back. Now, as you can see, if you remember, I did that video reacting to, that debate, the Pan-Africanists versus the French nationalists the other day. And of course, you had a bunch of Frenchmen, saying, oh, we don't care about Mali. Who cares about Mali, right? Mali just a speck of dust. We don't care about that. But here we have the director of French intelligence saying out of his own mouth that no, That is one of our interests. We are watching the developments on the ground. We are gathering intelligence, right? We are observing, how things are going because they care. They're fixated on Mali. They're fixated on Africa, right? Of course, the average barbarian on the street, because he doesn't understand how the world works. So he's going to say, oh, who cares about Africa? Who cares about this and that? But your leaders obviously care, right? You're just a simpleton barbarian on the street. In the grand scheme of things, you're irrelevant, right? You're just a bonehead. You're just a cog in the machine. Nobody cares what you think. But at the heights of power, yes, these men are scrambling and stressing about the African continent because they know their survival depends upon the African continent. And not only that, but currently in Mali right now, like I said, there's currently an agent of the DGSE by the name of Yann Vezirier currently in custody, right? On charges of espionage and trying to overthrow the government. So definitely as the director of the DGSE, Mali is of the utmost importance because one of his agents is currently in custody, right? And I'm sure the holiday season coming up, his family is stressing and worried about him, right? So definitely Nicolas Lanier, the director of foreign intelligence in France, he's definitely, watching the developments in Mali and the Sahel very closely, as they've been doing for, since they've been kicked out. But anyways, back to, the propaganda in the international media. Oh man, Mali about to fall. Listen, the director of French intelligence told you out of his own mouth, the terrorist groups, the so-called criminal organizations on the continent, they do not have the capability, the capacity, or the willingness, or the courage to take over the government. He said it himself. They don't have the capacity. They can't do it. Even with all their foreign sponsors, the French intelligence says they can't do it. They admitted it. They can't do it. They can't do it. It's not happening, right? Now, the reason why he said that publicly, I don't know. Maybe he's admitting that the military in Mali, contrary to predictions, has been able to hold its own against these so-called criminal organizations and their foreign sponsors. Also, it shows that they might have made a miscalculation. Maybe they might have thought that they had the capability to take the capital, but then, as you can see, in the past week or so, the terrorists have been taking a beating. I obviously cannot show the images and the videos on my channel, but I'm talking about, man, getting killed by the hundreds, getting decapitated, having their head put on a stick. I mean, it's been a lot of losses, man. I've seen commanders getting killed in the heat of battle. It's been real bad, so the foreign sponsors, they sitting back, they watching their criminal organizations, their mercenaries, taking losses. So now the French government came out and said, listen, the terrorist groups, they can't do it. They don't have the capacity to do it. They're getting smashed by the armies of the AES, right? The armies of the AES are destroying them on the field of battle. They're getting killed by the hundreds, by the boatloads and legions, right? So they can't do it. It's all propaganda. The capital is not about to fall. Bamako is still standing. Oh my God, bro. Something else that they showed me is that they most likely underestimated the defensive capabilities of the AES, right? They probably thought that the AES, security apparatus was more fragile than they originally determined, right? And obviously they've been proven wrong by the fact that the capital is still standing. President Assimi Goïta is still in power. He's inaugurating new projects. He's outside every day. He's not hiding. He's not ducking the smoke. If you want to find him, you already know where he's at. He's on social media. He lets you know where he's at. Listen, I'm over here. I'm doing this today. Tomorrow I'm going to be over here. I had a meeting with this person today. He's not ducking the smoke. He's not hiding his location. You know where to find him, right? So if it's beef, you know where to find him, right? But of course, because the fact that y'all bluffing, of course, the fact that y'all fraudulent, of course, the fact that you underestimated the security apparatus, even the director of the French Secret Service has to come out and say, you know what? Bamako not about to fall. You know what? Maybe we might have jumped the gun on that one. Bamako not about to fall anytime soon. The terrorist groups, they don't have the capacity, right? They don't have the capacity, even though we gave them all type of weapons and, air defense systems and drones and everything like that and endless supply of ammunition and millions of dollars. They still cannot take the capital. We might have underestimated the security apparatus of the AES. But anyways, like I said before, take a look up on the screen. Today, November 10th, President Assimi Goïta launches the Presidential Hospital Emergency Project. His Excellency, Army General President Assimi Goïta, this Monday, November 10th, laid the first stone of the Presidential Hospital Emergency Project. The ceremony, held at the Corofina Referral Health Center, marks the launch of an extensive program to modernize the health system in Mali. The event was held in the presence of the Prime Minister, the President of the National Transitional Council, the Minister of Health and Social Development, and the Governor of the Bamako District, and many members of the government, diplomats, and partners of Mali. So like I said, man, President Assimi Goïta, he's outside every day. You know where to find him. He's not hiding. He's not ducking the smoke. Anyways, I want to switch gears for a little bit since we're on the topic of foreign intelligence. So let's talk about some whistleblowers that used to work for the CIA, and they're going to give us some insight on some of the, covert operations they used to be involved in when they were an active officer. The first one we're going to talk about is John Stockwell, the former operations director. As you can see, John Stockwell, an American former CIA officer who became a critic of the United States government after serving 7 tours of duty over 13 years, having managed American involvement in the Angolan Civil War as chief of the Angola Task Force during the 1975 covert operations. He resigned and wrote the book In Search of Enemies. So I'm going to play a clip from him, from back in the day. And of course, I know the topic is the DGSE, the French intelligence services, but the DGSE, the CIA, yeah, same thing, man. Same thing, bro. Working to defend the same interests. So let's get into it. I'll be right back.
Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds. And this is a major function of the CIA. 400 journalists cooperating with the CIA, including some of the biggest names in the business, to consciously introduce the stories into the press.
Well, give me a concrete example of how you use the press this way, how a false story is planted and how you got it published.
Well, for example, in my war, the Angola War that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Times, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Times. And we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbundu women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
Next person I want to talk about is a gentleman by the name of Frank Snepp, another former CIA director. Frank Warren Snepp, an American journalist and former chief analyst of North Vietnamese strategy for the CIA during the Vietnam War. Let's get into his clip. I'll be right back.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually, the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. And I would say our percentage planning that kind of data was 70 to 80%. The correspondents we targeted were those who had terrific influence, the most respected journalists in Saigon, like Robert Chaplin of the New Yorker magazine, Kai's Beach of the Los Angeles Times from time to time, and also he worked for the Chicago Daily News. Bud Merrick of U.S. News and World Report, Malcolm Brown of the New York Times, even Maynard Parker of Newsweek magazine. We would go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true.
All right, we back. Now, I know we're on the topic of Mali and President Assimi Goïta, but I want to pivot over to Niger and President Chiani because he revealed some important information to us yesterday or the other day, also about, some covert operations, some covert destabilization tactics of the French government. So we're going to get into that. Of course, I'm going to translate it to English, run the clip. I'll be right back.
It is a truth, and we will never stop saying it. Just the day before yesterday, there was an amphibious helicopter carrier called Tonnerre that docked at the autonomous port of Cotonou. On board there are thousands of French soldiers. They will tell you it's an exercise. But how many ports are more suitable than the Beninese port for conducting these types of exercises? And as far as I know, to date, this must be the 10th landing via amphibious helicopter carrier. They must be on their 10th landing in Cotonou. That's why. Despite the calm, despite the resumption of the initiative, we urge you to remain vigilant. Whether deployed or in quarters, stay alert. Listen. Listen to the advice of the military authorities and your direct commands. They know what they are talking about and they speak in the interest of national security. Thank you for everything you do and will be called upon to do to keep our country standing. We are organizing at the national level and at the confederal level.
All right, we back. Now, President Chiani, he was speaking to the military, and he was basically, letting them know that according to intelligence that we have gathered, there are French military aircrafts in the vicinity, specifically landing in the port of Cotonou, which is in Benin, which is the southern neighbor of the AES, the southern neighbor of Niger and Burkina, I believe so. And I went and verified the information, and that is true, right? Just the other day, November 9th and November 8th, there were 2 flights made from the French Air Force, and they were active in the area of Benin, right? I don't know if they were landing or if they were arriving, but as you can see, that is accurate what he said. Yes, there are French aircrafts in the vicinity. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if they're coming to drop things off, if they're coming to pick things up, if they're coming to conduct surveillance. But the fact remains that General Chiani was accurate in what he said. Not only do we have intelligence agents in Burkina and Mali, but we also have, clandestine, flights from the French Air Force being, conducted on the coast of Benin. And that's why I talk so much about the importance of cooperating our foreign policy, our military policy. It should not be a case where one country is, for example, has a hostile position towards France, but the next door neighbor is friendly towards France. We have to align our foreign policy, our military policy, our economic policy, because that is how the adversary is able to sneak his way back in, right? Just like when they got kicked out of Burkina, what did they do? They went next door over to Niger, right? To Mohamed Bazoum when he was still in power. Then he got overthrown, and then of course we know what happened. So we have to align our military policy, our economic policy. I think this mindset that black men have of I want to do whatever I want to be hyper independent, and I want to No, as a collective, we cannot afford for one guy to be doing this thing and the guy next door, he's doing something totally different. No, forget that. I don't care about your freedom and sovereignty. We have to align our economic and foreign policy. And that's why I say the ethno-nationalist, tribalist delineator, he's a liability, right? That independent, that hyper-independent, that tribalist black man mentality, that's a liability. And that's why I say in the future, the governments that are aligned with Pan-Africanism, we need to overtake the tribal-minded governments, right? We need to conquer the tribal-minded governments and put them under our supremacy because they're a liability to our progress. Now, just a disclaimer, I'm not calling for anybody to overthrow a government. I'm not saying anything like that. Just want to give the disclaimer. We're not calling for that. We believe in democracy. We believe in democracy and elections, right? I just got to say that for the, the State Department agent that's listening to the video. We're not calling for the violent removal of any government. We're just talking about in the future, in the distant future, right? When we have the international Pan-African militia, right? We're not talking about right now, just got to give the disclaimer, in case anybody listening, you don't want the black SUVs at the front door. We just having a geopolitical conversation. That's all we doing, right? We're not bringing harm to nobody. We believe in democracy. But anyways, back to the topic of propaganda. I want to talk about a story that I see in the media against talking about Niger, which I believe that is false. I believe this is, once again, the handiwork of the DGSE, spreading false information, disinformation, propaganda, things like that, right? Take a look up on the screen. I seen this headline coming out today. It said this: the possible sale of 1,000 metric tons of uranium from Niger to Russia alarms France. France is angered by Niger's plan to sell 1,000 metric tons of uranium to Russia. Now, there's only one problem with this headline. When you examine the sources that they used, right? They didn't take any sources from, for example, the Foreign Ministry of Niger, from any government officials in Niger, or even any government officials in Russia. The only source for this story is the French security services, right? Not even a person specifically, just the French security services is the only source for this information, right? Not even anybody from Niger or Russia. They didn't come out and make a statement. The only source for this information is the French government, right? Take a look up on the screen. French officials said they are convinced that a deal was recently reached for $170 million between the military government in Niger, led by General Abdurrahman Chiani, and the Russian nuclear giant Rosatom for the acquisition of 1,000 metric tons of uranium. Now, take a look up on the screen. The French security services and the French media have reported that Russia could buy 1,000 metric tons of leftover uranium from a mine in Niger. While Russia has expressed interest in Niger's uranium, there has been no official confirmation of a sale of stockpiled uranium, right? So there is no confirmation from the Nigerian Foreign Ministry, the Russian Foreign Ministry. The only source for this information is the French government. My God, like I said, and we just watched those two clips from those two former officers in the CIA, and they would talk about how they would deliberately plant misinformation into the media, disinformation into the media, and of course the source would always be anonymous, some anonymous source, some French security source told us this. How would the French security source be in the know of what is happening between Niger and any foreign country? How would they know that? How would they be in the know? How is that a credible source of information when they don't even have an embassy in Niger? They don't even have a military base in Niger. They've been kicked out of Niger. Their multinationals been kicked out of Niger. How would they have inside information as to what's happening in Niger? Now, what is happening in Niger is they are building nuclear reactors. Take a look up on the screen. Niger says they want to build 2 nuclear reactors in partnership with Russia, right? They want to build nuclear reactors, which means they want to capture the value domestically of the uranium on their soil, on their territory. But building nuclear reactors is very different than selling stockpiles of uranium, right? Building nuclear reactors is the first step to actually, engaging in large scale industrialization, actually switching the economic model from being a raw producer, of the raw material to now with those nuclear reactors in place. Now you can really see large scale economic growth. Now you can really improve the quality of life for your citizens. Now that is actually true, right? We actually got official statements from the government officials in Niger actually confirming that. But when it comes to any sale of uranium, any stockpiles of uranium, there's no confirmation of that. There has been no government officials on either side that has confirmed that. It's only the French government that put that out into the atmosphere for whatever reason. Just like they said the capital of Bamako is about to fall. I don't know why they're spreading so much lies and propaganda, but also when it comes to Russia, don't they already have an abundant supply of uranium already? In fact, doesn't Russia export uranium to the United States and Europe and things like that? Take a look up on the screen. This headline came out a few months ago. Russia continues to export uranium to the United States, right? So Russia is already a major player when it comes to uranium, when it comes to the enrichment, when it comes to the export and sale of uranium. They already sell uranium to European nations and the United States. So I'm not even understanding the angle of that propaganda. But like I said, man, you have to, when you see stories like these, you have to go, who is the source, right? Who is the source? Is this coming from the foreign ministry of the government? Or is this coming from some anonymous source? Is this coming from the French Secret Service? The French security services? You have to look at the source of the information, man. A lot of these sources for certain stories be very questionable, right? It'd be some random white guy in Switzerland and he's the source. Like, come on now. But anyways, this is not the first time that the French government has put out some false information, right? I remember a couple years back, they put out a statement. I think it was the French minister of the armed forces by the name of Jean-Yves Le Drian. He said, take a look up on the screen. The French foreign minister accuses Russian mercenaries of despoiling Mali, right? Basically, plundering the resources in Mali, right? He said this: they are already at the moment helping themselves to the country's resources in exchange for protecting the military government. They are despoiling Mali, he told the journal Le Dimanche, the newspaper, in remarks on Sunday. So this was back in January 2022. The French foreign minister basically saying the same thing they're saying about Niger right now. Oh man, Russia's plundering the resources, right? Now, the Century conducted some investigative journalism on, Russian activities in Mali in the gold sector, right? And they made some interesting findings, right? Take a look up on the screen. This is what they said in their report. Russian emissaries had not considered that positive relations with the Minister of Defense, Sadio Kamara, would not necessarily translate into positive relations with President Assimi Goïta. Despite rumors that mining licenses were granted in the southwest region and that such licenses could be exploited by Wagner operatives, all three Russian ventures were unsuccessful in securing long-term licenses. One source at the Ministry of Mines told the Century that the Russians tried to acquire mining concessions, but there was no willingness to bend to their demands, right? So, listen, the Russians have not even been able to secure a single mining concession in Mali. But the French government a couple years ago, back in 2022, said the Russians were plundering the gold and plundering the resources. And after some, investigative journalism took place, we found out that was a lie. That was propaganda. They haven't been able to secure a single mining license, a single mining concession in Mali, right? So like I said, when you see stories like this come out, oh man, Niger about to sell the uranium to Russia, and then you look at the source, and the source is the French government. Man, come on now. Now, what is the purpose of them putting out all this misinformation? Oh man, the Russians taking the gold, the Russians taking the uranium. It's just to cause confusion. It's just to cause confusion. That's all. And also, it's an easy way to deflect from your own crimes, because in reality, it's actually the French that historically were plundering the gold and the uranium in the region. But by now being able to point the finger at somebody else, see, it's actually the Russians. Listen, we already know how the adversary does it. Anytime he has the opportunity to deflect accountability off himself, he's going to do it, right? It's just a way to deflect the accountability off themselves as the historical plunderers and the historical robbers and the historical crooks and thieves that have been plundering the region. So by now deflecting that accountability off to somebody else, they're able to sneak out the back door and have people forget that in reality, you were the plunderer. You were the barbarian that was running off with the gold and the uranium. And then when we actually investigate, we find out that the Russians haven't even been able to secure a single mining concession in Mali, and there has been no confirmed sale of uranium. Now, there has been a confirmed, like I said, nuclear reactors being built in Niger. That's a fact. There has been, like I said, confirmed gold refineries being built in Mali. That's a fact. Take a look up on the screen. Mali will hold a 62% stake in the first national gold refinery, right? That is true. That is a fact. That actually came directly from the government. They confirmed it, right? So no, there is no gold or uranium being plundered, but there are nuclear reactors and gold refineries being built, right? And when the French were actually in the region, for years and decades, how come you never built a single nuclear reactor? How come you didn't build a single gold refinery? How come as soon as you get kicked out, all of a sudden gold refineries and nuclear reactors are being established, right? And that's what really got you angry. That's what really got you angry, right? These imaginary stories about mining concessions in uranium and gold, that's not why you're stressing. You're upset because you see gold refineries are being established. You see nuclear reactors are being established. And you know that once these things become a reality, that's going to change the geopolitical landscape on a whole nother level, right? On a whole nother level, right? Let's continue. Take a look up on the screen, right? When complete, the gold refinery will be able to produce 200 tons of gold a year, worth approximately $130 billion. This is quadruple Mali's present gold output. That's why you're really mad. That's why you're really angry, right? You want to distract everybody from that. with these imaginary stories, right? But this is why you're really mad though. Now, sometime last year, there was similar rumors that were circulating. Right now, it's Russia, but last year they were saying that Niger was going to sell uranium to Iran, right? We seen headlines like this coming out back in 2024. The Niger-Iran uranium deal raises fears of nuclear proliferation, right? And come to find out, that was also a lie. That was also a rumor, right? With some anonymous sources. Take a look up on the screen. There were rumors and intelligence reports in 2024 that Niger was considering or signed a deal to sell uranium to Iran. But these reports have officially been denied by the military government in Niger. And no deal or transfer of uranium has been confirmed, right? So like I say, man, they be putting headlines in the media. Straight lies, bro. Straight fabrication. Take a look up on the screen. The Nigerian government explicitly rejected these false allegations. The prime minister stated that if a deal had been signed, it would have been public, not under the table. Exactly, right? These anonymous sources, oh man, they about to sell it to Iran. That was last year. Now this year, they about to sell it to Russia. 2 years ago, Mali selling gold to Russia. Bro, the misinformation, the disinformation campaign is in full swing. It's in full swing. Man, you got to be on your toes out here, bro. Man, the French intelligence scrambling. But anyways, I just wanted to address that because I got a couple emails in regards to that. No, there has been no sale of uranium to Russia. The only source for this information is the French intelligence services, who are not even in Niger at all. The same French intelligence services that said that Bamako was about to fall, then they came out later and said, actually, it's not going to fall anytime soon. So like I said, man, these guys have no credibility. So like I said, if it's not coming directly from the government, if it's not coming directly from the foreign ministry, if it's not coming directly from President Chiani, if it's not coming directly from the spokesperson of the government, you should take the information with some caution, right? Be cautious, double check. And of course, you can email me and I can, see if I can conduct some research to confirm if it's true, because we are currently engaged in a full-scale information war against the French government. They just flooding the zone with false information right now. But anyways, I want to go back to what we talked about earlier, the French, clandestinely sending planes in and out of Benin. I want to get to this brother's video. I'm going to translate his video. He was giving his analysis, his thoughts on the situation, and I want to share what he had to say. So anyway, run the clip. I'll be right back.
It looks like that. It is an amphibious helicopter carrier, a true floating military base capable of deploying more than 16 aircraft. It can carry up to 1,000 infantrymen, armored vehicles, and a significant arsenal. Since last December, His Excellency General Chani has reported about 10 landings at the port of Cotonou. These movements do not resemble either a military exercise or training of the Beninese forces. According to him, these are soldiers retreating to a military base made available to them. These flows can be estimated at several thousand men on Beninese soil. The French forces officially expelled from Niger are indeed present in Cotonou. And why go through Benin? Because Cotonou serves as the ideal Trojan horse. Bases like the one in Touro would serve as hubs to arm and train terrorist groups, then deliver weapons at night by helicopter with erased registrations to cover their tracks. The objective would be twofold: to provide military support to these groups and to conduct economic sabotage aimed at starving Niger to make it yield to internal pressure. This scenario is reminiscent of the strategy used in Libya. Sow chaos to regain control over the country's resources. Benin would have become a French aircraft carrier to suffocate Niger without firing an official shot. The ultimate goal is to implode the AES in 3 stages: provoke a revolt in Mali, cause a blackout in Niger, an uprising in Burkina, then reinstall Bazoum as a puppet and restart uranium at cut-rate prices under the banner of restored democracy.
All right, we back. Now, before we get out of here, since we're talking about, the fight against terrorism, since we're talking about Al-Qaeda, since we're talking about, the Nigerian Christians and things like that, Donald Trump, coming saving the Nigerian Christians. It's so ironic today because today Trump had an official visit at the White House with the leader in Syria, the former jihadist, the former international terrorist, formerly known as Mohammed al-Jolani. He changed his name to Ahmed al-Sharaa. He met up with President Donald Trump today in the White House today, a former jihadist terrorist, a war criminal who committed crimes against humanity and chopped off heads. He is meeting with the President of the United States today in the White House today. Yes, the president of Syria, former jihadist, former commander of Al-Qaeda in Syria. And don't forget, he already met President Macron in France at the Elysee. He already met President Macron, kicked it. They was sipping tea in Paris, right? Then he came over to the United States. Now he's sipping champagne with Trump, things like that, right? Going to Times Square, having pizza, you know, a former jihadist, right? A jihadist, right? Now, these are the same people that say they want to save the Nigerian Christians, right? These are the same people that say they're engaged in the fight against terrorism. Man, life is crazy, man. I just wanted to, show that there, show the hypocrisy and the double standards on full display. We're fighting against Al-Qaeda, but I'm linking up with the former Al-Qaeda commander. Anyway, man, it's your boy Nefakari Salim back in the building. Yes, indeed. Second single of the next project, The Spy in Bamako. Pin comment at the top. Link in the description. Support the Patreon, NTD1814. And I'm gone. Peace.
Feel like a see me, I feel like I'm Saudi or ran up on Yan in the middle of Bamako. Enemy line, they claiming he innocent. Don't do no talking, I gotta move militant. Don't do no talking, I hit him with facts. 1804, bringing it back. 1804 like I'm Mother Cap Henry. King with the vision, the crown never empty. Top of the mountain, my soldiers defend me. Ducking and dodging the foreign intelligence. Hitting my dance on the DGSE. Dodging they traps, still on my feet. Feeling impeccable, feel like I'm shining. Go to my neck and I'm flooded with diamonds. Go to my neck and I feel like a mess. Feel like a lion, I'm in a savannah. Feel like the king when I'm up in the jungle. Never defeated, I never been humble. Come out victorious every encounter. Money machine give me help when I count it. Money machine stack it up in a beat. Heart of a king and I ride for the team. Weight of the world got it stuck on my shoulders. Bet you can feel it, my heart getting colder. Yeah, gotta stay focused so when it's in shots I gotta react. Cause I'm a target, I'm under attack. Grabbing a weapon, I tell her get back. Mission exposed, secrets unfold. Enemy try but I'm still in control. Got your boy sitting in Bamako prison. Hoping they wish we sending them home. Enemy know that we good under pressure. Been through the thunderous turbulent storm. Shorty a diamond, I told her she pressure. Hop in a whip and I'm taking her home. Hop in a whip and I'm swerving, I'm smashed. Killing my enemies, one of my passion. Rocking this gold like we in bikini. Feel like the captain, I'm clutching a heater. Yeah, gotta stay focused so when it's in shots I gotta react. Cause I'm a target, I'm under attack. Grabbing a weapon, I tell her get back. Mission exposed, secrets unfold. Enemy try but I'm still in control. Got your boy sitting in Bamako prison. Hoping and wishing we sending them home. Enemy know that we good under pressure. Been through the thunderous turbulent storm. Shorty a diamond, I told her she pressure. Hop in a whip and I'm taking her home. Hop in a whip and I'm swerving, I'm smashed. Killing my enemies, one of my passion. Rocking this gold like we in bikini. Feel like the captain, I'm clutching a heat.